Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. To purchase and book sessions with AJ Mahari, visit ajmahari.ca. This is the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. And now your host, AJ Mahari.
For many more people than not, you might have codependency, been in a relationship with someone with BPD, and maybe you're on off, maybe you've been ghosted, you're not sure if it's a discard, etc. But here's the thing. What accompanies codependency in a lot of these relationships with people with BPD? Limerence. And so in this podcast episode, I really want to break that down. So 3 stages of limerence and what's the differences between limerence and love, and how does this have interplay in a large part in what happens to people with codependency who meet someone and it's all too good to be true and it's fabulous in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it starts to unravel. And how does limerence keep you stuck? And how is limerence interacting with your codependency to keep you stuck? And that anybody that can't stop ruminating when you get to the point of if you're an ex of someone with BPD or it's on off, and if you can't get out of the chase, there's the trauma bond, the intermittent reinforcement, but the limerence is really present for more people than not. So let's get into that. Limerence versus love. What's the difference? Well, limerence has 3 stages, and stage 1 is infatuation, stage 2 is crystallization, and stage 3 of limerence is deterioration. Are you experiencing these stages of limerence? So the attraction, the sparkle, the sort of feeling like you really need this person. Whenever you're around that certain person, your stomach just does somersaults and your heart rate quickens. And if it's a BPDX right now, or you've been ghosted and you're not sure if it's a discard, wow, what are you supposed to do? Because they were everything, and you may still think they are, but they definitely were everything that you could have ever wanted, but only they really aren't, because the person that you met with BPD in the idealization, mirroring, people-pleasing of their codependency phase that some people call, quote, love bombing, but unquote, I really don't think that's what it is, but that's how it's experienced. So you might have felt that they were just perfect in every single way in the beginning. While your emotions are running so high, it's important to take a moment to stop and breathe. And that might be applicable now if you really want your ex back, or if you just got hoovered, or if you think somehow that all the Hoover promises and giving you what you hear is going to help you. It's important to stop and breathe. And it's important also to work with somebody if you're in BPD recycling the relationship, BPD on-off limbo, or you've been ghosted and you're not sure if it's a discard. Because with limerence, you're going to be ruminating practically 24/7. And people can't focus on their jobs, their careers, other things in their life. People are just so drawn to almost constantly ruminating about the person with BPD or the BPDX. You might not be, or you might not have fallen in love at all, but you might be falling, or you might have fallen deep into limerence. So what is limerence, and is there a cure? Well, limerence is a state of infatuation or obsession with another person that involves an all-consuming passion and intrusive thoughts that drive rumination. And this can be true whether you're with the person or not, whether you were with the person or not, whether you're ever going to be with the person again or not. And limerence can happen to people in ways that aren't just about people with BPD. They can happen in, like, for example, somebody could really be infatuated and obsessed with a celebrity that they've never met, but they believe that they are totally in love with them. It's another example of limerence. And I'm going to have something else coming because, yes, people with BPD can have limerence too. But this is right now I'm talking about people, partners, ex-partners, on-off partners of people with BPD, most of whom really do have codependency. So limerence is often a result of not being present, either through trauma or certain childhood developmental issues, which a lot of people with codependency have. Woundedness from childhood, perhaps some trauma, maybe it's just adverse experience and not capital T trauma, but it comes from your family of origin and there's woundedness in your childhood. There's been something dysfunctional taking place in your childhood. And many people don't really know what that is, but when I work with clients, that's what we work to figure out. Usually not very hard to connect the dots. Doesn't take a long time or anything, but it can be painful. And then connecting the dots is step one, but then working on how to break the limerence, how to break out of the trauma bond, how to be more present to the moment, how to cope with all the feelings that you are having, especially after this kind of breakup and or relationship on and off or relationship recycling. Alternatively, you may experience limerence when you are run down, if you haven't had enough sleep, for example, and you might be lacking some serotonin. So you fantasize that someone else could save you and crystallize those thoughts into a golden image of the one. Can you resonate with this? Because so many people with codependency, no matter where you're at now in the relationship cycle with a borderline, or even if you're, that you've been ghosted and you're not sure if you've been discarded. So many clients I've worked with say, well, I really believe that this is still the person for me. This is the one for me. This is my soulmate. And even with BP, some people say, or my twin flame. And the idea, the golden image that this is the one for you, this is the one that you're going to have your whole future with, and etc., comes crashing down in reality because the person with BPD that you met isn't really who they are. And that leaves you with limerence, and that leaves you in this crystallizing the thoughts of a golden image of they're still the one, no matter what they've done to you. And it can feel like ecstasy in the beginning with a borderline. Or even when they don't re-idealize you, if you're on off or whatever, if they ghosted you, if they hoover, if you try to recycle the relationship, initially it can feel like ecstasy. Again, even though they're not re-idealizing you, because you're like, oh, I've got the one, the person that you're so obsessed with. But each person with BPD that each of you might be with or still interested in or trying to get over, or all these different iterations, that person with BPD was never the person that you were so infatuated with, believing you so love, and that somehow they loved you back. So it feels like ecstasy in the beginning, but now you may be guarding your own emotions. This person feels safe to fantasize about because most likely nothing can happen, and the infatuated person is not in a grounded enough place to receive or be able to have a real relationship. But you are not really accepting that point of reality. You're still in maybe massive denial about that. And limerence can be a state of being that allows fantasies without any real present emotional intimacy. Or for some people with codependency, as much as you want that intimacy, emotional intimacy is kind of overwhelming and it can feel like a threat. And so that's even more so true for people with BPD. But is limerence healthy? And is it the same as love? Well, limerence versus love. Similarities. There's some similarities. The problem with the whole limerence versus love conundrum is really rather simple. The two look strikingly similar. They feel strikingly similar. As you're falling in limerence with someone, you'd be forgiven for thinking they are, quote, the one, unquote. Squint hard enough, and limerence looks an awful lot like love. Here are a couple of ways that the two are frustratingly similar, that love and limerence are frustratingly similar. The first way is that you are drawn to a certain person. Confusing hardly does it justice. When you're in limerence with someone, it's similar to falling in love. The attraction is real, and it is a form of infatuation that can mirror the early stages of falling in love, where you obviously think about the other person. And the second kind of similarity between limerence and love, limerence can happen with anyone anytime. You never know when you're about to fall in love, and it can happen with the most implausible person or people. As it turns out, limerence is the same, it could be, than with anyone, from a landlord, a boss, a celebrity, a shop owner, etc. But when it's with a person with BPD, and then it's like you don't even really know who that person is. And what's the difference between, or the differences between love and limerence? Well, no matter how hard you stare, limerence and love are not the same concepts. The main difference here is that love requires real, meaningful connection with another person, while limerence is all about the chase and lusting after someone, or rechasing, continued pursuit after being treated like you know what, and being ghosted, etc. The chase and lusting after someone. And that's not really love. And do you really love this person with BPD? Did you really love them? Did you really connect with them? Or was it really this sort of infatuated limerence that was unfolding with who you thought they were? If you're not sure which one you're feeling, then take a look, perhaps, at these major differences. You think the person will complete you, a very codependent belief that isn't often in people's consciousness. Are you looking for a relationship, or are you looking for someone to fix you? Or, in the case of codependence with borderlines, are you looking to fix someone else? Because perhaps that's what you've learned in childhood, but you're not consciously aware of that yet. Limerence is the feeling that the object of your desire will complete you. And that's a very codependent kind of belief that people aren't always thinking consciously. And this can be a form of trauma bonding, where one person is seeking to be saved by another, or since I'm talking to people who are non-borderlines but probably have codependency, I would turn that around and say that this form, you're on the side of the trauma bond where you are the person that's seeking to save another. You want them whether they're good for you or not. This is another difference between limerence and love. A loving, nurturing relationship should be all about mutual respect, reciprocity. You should grow with the relationship. However, when it comes to limerence, all of that goes directly out the window. The limerent person is desperate to have the object, no matter whether it is good for either of them, and they may idealize them. When a person with borderline personality disorder idealizes you, that's not necessarily from limerence. Limerence could be involved, but it's not all limerence. But when you rather idealize the borderline in the beginning as a codependent who may well be also experiencing limerence. And a third difference between love and limerence is that in limerence you ignore the person's flaws, seeing a bunch of red flags and ignoring them. You might be in limerence. With love, each person has the possibility to see the other's flaws and still like them, and there is more safety and genuine reciprocity. This doesn't happen with people with borderline personality disorder, and this involves the happiness hormones such as oxytocin and vasopressin there's clear communication and reciprocity in love, but not in limerence and codependency, where you're ignoring all the red flags and you're just taking abuse and confusing it to mean somehow that, oh, this is really a relationship that's worth fighting for. And many people with codependency in childhood, in your environment, in your family of origin, you will actually be wired. So your neurobiology is wired to have this confusion that love isn't really love if it doesn't accompany abuse or some difficulty or a need to please the other person first. And another difference between love and limerence, you neglect your own needs for them. Now, this is huge. For people with codependency and with limerence, you are self-abandoning, you're self-sacrificing, you are disappearing and not even maybe aware of it for some time. You are losing yourself. You are neglecting your own needs so much to try to meet every friggin' need of the borderline. And you know what? You can't satiate the borderline. You can't meet their needs, but you are totally neglecting your own needs. That's another sign of limerence. And so, is that infatuation taking priority over your needs? The difference is someone gives up their needs and wants to obsessively focus on the other person. Doesn't that sound familiar? And that there might be intermittent reinforcement from the limerent object, the person with BPD, by occasional connection and not real friendship or love. Or maybe it feels really like love because now maybe they've ghosted you, or they've given you the silent treatment or something, and now they're coming back to tell you what you want to hear, and then maybe get along for a little while. And this is your intermittent reinforcement, because the cycle's going to go around again. But when that intermittent reinforcement comes about, you think, oh, see, everything I'm giving, how I'm negating myself, abandoning myself, obsessed with this other person, oh, it's paying off, because now we're back in this good place. But it's not going to last. It is just the intermittent reinforcement of a trauma bond. And another difference between love and limerence is, in limerence, you're scared of real connection. This is also true for a lot of people with codependency. And you may not realize this because you're not like 100% scared, but you have a percentage of being really scared to be really committed. Many people with codependency do. So you're scared of real connection, real talk. There could be an underlying reason that your default is limerence. Deep down, the limerent person may be afraid of genuine connection, and that includes having fear of abandonment, as many people with codependency do. And you may be more comfortable with distance. There may be psychological reasons and fear why you prefer obsessing over connecting, but you're obsessing over connecting with somebody who really can't be connected to you in any age appropriate, consistent, congruent way. So that when things kind of blow up and it's really bad, then you sort of get a break from that connection that somehow you might feel overwhelmed by. So how can you really tell if you are limerent? Each individual in limerence may have a slightly different experience. There are several identifiable factors, though. Most notably, the person may believe or act like the other person will complete them. Because of this, the person may want the relationship, whether it is healthy or not. Does that sound familiar? There is also a dualistic reality to the combination of limerence and or codependency, and the need, unconsciously more often than not it is for people, to escape themselves. Because again, in childhood, people that have the adverse experience of codependency, that is a trauma response of its own, have often learned to externalize out their needs, focus on others in the hope that others will give back, but they rarely do, and not enough, and it's not mutual reciprocal. So it's also a limerent and codependent escapism and escaping one's self by putting all this focus and work and obsession, even when relationships have broken up, into that BPD-X. Because a lot of people with codependency and with limerence, or both, do not know how to really focus on self, not in healthy emotional ways, because people with codependency have somewhat of a lost self. And with the limerence and the experience and the trauma of what happens in a relationship with somebody with BPD and the stress, then you are even more lost to yourself. The limerence increases all that kind of fights against your needs to be able to learn how to take better care of yourself and see yourself and individuate, as well as help your wounded inner child to integrate with where you are now and where you're building to know yourself better and better again from this relationship and further loss of self. So a lot of this limerence and codependency is about escapism as well. And that's usually unconscious for most people. You know, if you're going to go back to that BPD-X, it's not going to work out. Lots of people say, well, I'm going to try, but I know I shouldn't, but I don't know what else to do. There's limerence involved in that besides your codependency as well. Because of this, the person may want the relationship, like I said, whether it's healthy or not. And additionally, you may ignore the person's flaws, neglect your own needs, and this likely derives from the fear of developing a real connection. Because don't forget, now, not everybody has codependency or limerence to the same degrees, if in fact you have both. But people with codependency are not secure in themselves, at least interpersonally and in relationships. And people with codependency tend to lack self-esteem and self-worth, aren't really positive about their self-trust or self-respect. Now, this only all gets worse after you've been relating to a person with BPD. So who's prone to limerence? Anyone can experience limerence, and that includes people with BPD. However, those who have encountered trauma or certain developmental issues, specifically in childhood, may especially be prone to this state of infatuation. On the other hand, those who are simply exhausted or drained, recognize exhausted or drained from trying to give, rescue, fix, get that borderline to therapy, just get them to understand you. So yeah, if you're exhausted or drained from a lack of sleep, a lot of stress, overstimulation, that can also cause the state of limerence to occur. So what are the 3 stages of limerence, as I mentioned before? They are infatuation, crystallization, and deterioration. Limerence isn't one state of being. It typically happens in 3 stages. You start to become attracted to a new person, and they pique your interest. You may notice this familiar process. Number 1, infatuation. The unobtainable nature of the person makes them more alluring. Now, you might not be consciously aware of this, but people with BPD, especially untreated, but unless they have recovered and healed. So people with BPD are unobtainable, but it doesn't seem like that in the beginning. So you find them so you do get into some infatuation with a borderline, and you if you don't know that in the beginning, you've ignored all the red flags, and maybe you don't know exactly what they are, but you're still willing to do that because of the limerence, not just the codependency. And then when you get to the valuation and things, the roller coaster starts whipping around, and then you're going back to intermittent reinforcement, and then more, conflict and on-off relationships and all this type of thing. You keep wanting them. You keep finding they're unobtainable, but they're really alluring. And then that goes into the reasons why in codependency that they're so alluring, as well as limerence. And this stage of limerence, the infatuation stage, includes addictive type behavior, thinking about the other person 24 hours a day, stress, heart palpitations, stomach anxiety, even intrusive thoughts. It's best described as an uncontrollable, overwhelming, like your body aches for this person. And the second stage of limerence is crystallization. While that infatuation is unlikely to wane fast, the second stage of limerence is all about solidifying that idea of the infatuation. Now, here's where you get into big trouble with borderlines. Because after the idealization phase and everything, where it's really easy to think that's love and you're really infatuated, etc. And is it love or is it infatuation? I think it turns out to be more like a fantasy infatuation of a combination of limerence and codependency for a lot of people. And then the second stage of limerence is solidifying that idea in spite of the fact that you've probably been split to devaluation in minor or major ways several times as you're getting to know this person or after a certain point in time. And so, in spite of that, you're solidifying the idea with limerence, not love, that this infatuation, you start to really believe that the person is the solution to all your problems, when really the borderline is what's causing a big chunk of your problems. Codependency and your own childhood woundedness would also be contributing there. So you decide that the person is flawless in spite of seeing flaws when you start to see those flaws, and you idealize them by putting them on a pedestal. So this is going on in a different way for borderlines, and I'll talk about that in another episode. But this is what's happening to you, the codependent, the ex, the on-off, the limbo place, the ghosted or discarded person, or you broken up with them, but you're obsessed with them. And this limerence of infatuation that's been crystallized, which happens in a trauma bond, it gets crystallized with the intermittent reinforcement, and you ignore the abuse and the rough and the horrible times to a degree. Then you're now having the borderline and who you want them to be, who you thought they were, on a pedestal. And the third stage of limerence is deterioration. Reality starts to sneak into your mind, and you start to realize that you will never have this person, or the person with BPD is not the person that you're lusting after, that you've been in a relationship with, now that maybe you were ghosted or discarded by, and you can't stop thinking about them. And you still have them kind of in a crystallized place, but it's starting to deteriorate. And that's very painful, and it's described in many ways by people. And so, how are you supposed to know what to do with this if you don't really know what's happening for you? And the final stage of limerence is the disappointment in the love object and needing to let go of them. It's the realization that nothing is going to happen that you hoped for. That in the first two phases of limerence, infatuation and crystallization, that you really believed was what was going to be and who they were going to be, and everything was great. And it's a feeling of loss. There are so many negative effects to limerence. Unsurprisingly, limerence can negatively affect your life. This state can include stress, loss of sleep, obsessive thinking, and obsessive things. All of the prior mentioned means that you may not be living the healthiest lifestyle when you're in limerence with another person with that borderline. The deeper you fall, the more likely you are to neglect your basic needs and self-abandon yourself, thinking that you need to get this person back. Failing to sleep or eat well, or failing to even be able to focus on your job, your work, other important people and things in your life will have a massive impact, negative impact on your well-being. These are the negative effects of limerence. And it doesn't end there. When you're in the thick of it, you might start to engage in some risky behavior that could start a ripple effect throughout your entire life. Some people risk their relationship by having a limerent affair. This happens a lot, not only with people with BPD, but people with codependency with limerence. And this experience often mirrors fear of love or their partner's power. So how can you manage limerence? Worried that you are drowning in a state of limerence? Don't worry. there's a life jacket coming your way. Once you've identified that there's a problem, you can take some positive steps to pull yourself back to reality. Underneath limerence is a fear of being with yourself. This is a highlighted codependent trait. And making a good enough loving relationship with yourself because you're lacking that. You were lacking that when you meant the borderline. You're really lost and lacking self now. And there may be patterns of avoidance and a lack of self-care. There's definitely a lack of self-love and an inability to create secure attachment. So, again, these are the negative impacts of limerence. And this can shift with setting limits and setting top lines of behavior, meaning getting accountable to treating yourself much better. That means taking care of your diet, getting rest, nurturing your friendships, exercising, sleeping, taking care of your basic needs. You should also stop negative self-talk. That's a long process. That's work. You need to also look at negative core beliefs that you may not have been aware of. There's inner child work and all kinds of things, but and behavior. So stop negative self-talk and behavior, such as obsessive thinking. But in order to put yourself in the best position to do any of this as relates to the limerence, which is also driving your obsessive, intrusive rumination on if it's a borderline X or you're trying to go no contact. That's where I come in for a lot of clients, and that's where working with someone really helps. And I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you, because you need to be able to learn to cope with that time of not only letting go, but of trying different methods to stop the rumination, and that is still the limerence driving the rumination as well as the codependency. But for people with limerence, but also codependency, you really don't know how to focus on yourself. And a lot of people think, well, what am I talking about with that? Well, I see it in the process of working with clients that when we start to really try to talk, and when I start to guide them into talking about themselves, they go back to talking about the borderline often. To be able to take care of yourself, to stop the negative self-talk, the negative core beliefs that are driving your obsessive thinking, because you've also got this limerence and having all these negative impacts, you also have to deal with the reality of looking more realistically at allowing the deterioration, if you will, out of limerence, that last stage, because you need to break the trauma bond with the borderline. If you can't take your mind off the person in question, there are different things you can do, like a 2-minute rule. That means only thinking about the love object for 2 minutes, then moving on, which is hard to do. Since limerence is a state of infatuation, chances are you're obsessing about what you thought that person had to offer. Switch up the focus and try to find that sense of joy within yourself, but also, the pain that you have to process in this with the codependency and BPD breakups and working toward no contact or very low contact if there's children involved. Then you need to find that sense of just yourself. I wouldn't say joy necessarily, because that might be really difficult for a while. And you can try making a list. I always recommend this to clients. Make a list of the characteristics you feel the person has and starting to work on owning them yourself so you don't feel you need the other person. And also making a list of all the negative that you really experienced from this person with BPD. And then, put the positive on a different page. The negative always outweighs the positive. Limerence is not anything diagnosable, but it is an experience that people can be, I guess the best way to put it is, triggered into. Limerence, for a lot of people with codependency, is very present. So that was the difference between limerence and love. And you might not want to hear this yet. You might be like, no way. It's not limerence. I really love this person. I really love this person with BPD. To whatever degree people feel that way, that can often be more about limerence, the infatuation, crystallization, until it starts getting so bad that you get into the deterioration stage of limerence. And that's where you have a chance, and working with someone, especially working on your codependency as well, to really start to not only manage the limerence, but work your way toward focusing on yourself, taking care of yourself, and the work that is involved in letting go of the person with BPD, because even if they ghosted you, they discarded you. I've had so many clients that have been in no contact, maybe by their own choice, maybe not, or the borderline was gone anyways, and they chose no contact. But many people have not been in contact with or seen or talked to their ex with BPD for incredibly varying lengths of time. Months, 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. I've had a few clients in the 4 to 5. I had even a few clients in the 10-year range that they were still obsessing, they were still experiencing limerence, and they were still codependent, and they still hadn't broken the trauma bond. So this is why it's really important for you to know that you really can't break the trauma bond all by yourself. I went through some of this in different ways, and I had a couple relationships with a couple cluster Bs, and I know exactly what it's like to be sitting where you are, where you might well be right now, and with limerence. I had one experience in a relationship before and after the relationship. I was really, really experiencing limerence, and it just takes over your whole world. It just makes it that you can hardly think about anything but that person. It's really important to try to understand this. And when I work with clients, I have various different strategies to help people to implement to begin to break the limerent obsession. And limerence is something that it can last and hang around for people. Like I said, I've had clients that really have limerence and they have some codependency, and people with codependency can also have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or you might have now PTSD from the relationship with somebody with BPD, especially if it was a longer term, more intense, more volatile, very abusive situation. There's no shame in needing help and to reach out and to invest in yourself. And when you just don't think you can stand to not get that borderline back is really the time when you're kind of vacillating between, if you have this limerence, you're vacillating between the crystallization phase and kind of headed toward the deterioration phase, which kind of matches along in a way with people with codependency who know. So many clients have said to me, I don't know what to do, but I might still love him or her, but I can't do it anymore. I'm exhausted. I can't stand it. I can't focus. I don't know how to work. I'm going to lose my job. My kids are, if you have young kids, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't stand it. And so there's going to be a lot of tumult and chaos and pain. But this is why people really need to work toward no contact. And firm no contact, if there's children involved, firm low contact with strategy around that, because people with BPD often, an ex with BPD who's the mother or father of your children or child will definitely try to use that child to get your attention ad infinitum. And you have to really work on your boundaries. But you see, all of this involves a process where there's so many different things to work on, not necessarily all at once, and not necessarily in a chronological order way either, but making sure that you're actually making progress with each stage and phase of the codependency, of the trauma from the relationship, breaking the trauma bond, family of origin work, the wounded inner child, and how to work your way out of the limerence. Limerence sometimes for some people, but I haven't really experienced this with clients much in the last almost 34 years of working with people to heal and recover from these relationships and woundedness in childhood that people are usually not so consciously aware of, or that they don't believe is affecting them now in relationships, because maybe it wasn't capital T trauma and maybe you haven't really identified it. It's really important to know that if you're just staying away from your ex, if you're managing that, no contact isn't just you not calling them or getting in touch with them, or no contact means changing your phone number, changing email addresses, or trying to find ways to block them in email, blocking them on every single other avenue of communication that they could possibly hoover you on or reach out. Because if you're going to get a hit and you're coming from, so the codependency is one thing, the intermittent reinforcement, the trauma bond. But then with the limerence, if you're going to get a hit of sort of reinfatuation, you're going to go from that deterioration stage back to the infatuation, and then that's going to start to crystallize again. And this is what happens in relationship recycling. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful, because I think more people with codependency who are with borderline partners, and then most of these relationships don't work out, etc. But I think a lot of people with codependency have a lot of reasons why. It's so darn hard to focus on yourself and go no contact and work with someone, because the limerence is pulling you one way, and your intellectual mind might be like, but I can't take this anymore, I can't do this anymore. But then the limerence, and the crystallization of the infatuation, because it's really been a fantasy. And it's really hard for people to realize that, because, you're not cluster B or anything. But then there's another thing I just want to remind you of, that the reason there is no such thing as codependent personality disorder in the DSM is because when it was presented to the DSM in the mid-1980s by a psychiatrist, DSM-3, and DSM-3 opened wide and conjured up and created and added a whole bunch of stuff. They wouldn't take codependent personality disorder as a construct. Why not? Because the APA, not that I'm saying they were right or wrong, I don't know, but they said that codependence overlaps too much with borderline personality disorder, and from cluster C, dependent personality disorder. And there are reasons from your childhood why you have codependency. And some people have a few traits of codependency. You have it really moderately. You might have codependency sort of significantly or severely. But the thing is, it only takes one trait, really one trait of codependency, or two, to have you stuck in a trauma bond with a borderline. And especially because I think there is an aspect of limerence to this for everyone to one degree or another, in that infatuation, because everything happens with the borderline so fast, and it feels so good, and it is always too good to be true. And then when you start to see, so you're infatuated more than you're in love, because you don't really know this person. And then when the big split at the evaluation or the first evaluation comes, you're like, what's going on here? But you want to overlook it. You don't take care of yourself, because you're already in the infatuation to crystallization stage, get really into the crystallization of limerence when you have had a honeymoon phase with a borderline. And then when everything starts going awry and you're on this roller coaster, well, you totally ignore yourself. That's codependence, and it's the crystallization of the limerence. And then when people want to get off this roller coaster and stop walking on these eggshells, well, codependency makes it difficult. You need to look at your past and everything in that kind of healing process too. But the limerence makes it really, really, really difficult and painful, because so many people don't understand why they can't stop ruminating, why they can't stop thinking about this person. And the deterioration of limerence is starting to happen, the third stage, and you need support with that. You need help with that so that you can work your way out of that, to continue to work on the no contact and continue to work on why you ended up with a borderline in the first place. Because I'm telling you, somebody who's worked with clients for almost 34 years now, been through all this myself too, it's always correlated back to the family of origin. It's always, in one way or another, to one degree or another, correlated back to you being wounded in childhood in one way or another. And it doesn't have to mean that parents were cluster B, or that your mother or father was really injurious to you in some malicious way, as cluster B parents often are. It doesn't have to mean any of that. So this was the 3 stages of limerence, and the negative impact and the differences between limerence and love. And I hope you really think about this, because most people who believe they're so in love with the borderline, you can get them back, you can make it work, you can fix, you can get it to change, all of these things. Most of you, I believe, you have to think about it for yourself, but I believe more people than not are also experiencing severe limerence.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. Our passion is to bring expert information for people that are hurt by someone with BPD. We truly hope you've gotten something from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.